Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm good, Kevin. How are you?
Good. You look tan, rested, and ready, man.
I don't know about any of the three, but it is warmer.
So the first thing I want to talk today is about, so Kroger continues to move forward with its pure play e-grocery hub and spoke approach to expansion, announcing 3 more markets in the last week or so that they're going to, develop this hub and spoke system where they're going to be able to service markets like, I guess, Austin and San Antonio, Texas, and Birmingham, Alabama, without having actual stores there. And the interesting thing to me about that was 2 of those markets, many, many years ago, like a couple of decades ago, they had stores in and pulled out for a variety of reasons. But they have clearly made the decision that this is where, I haven't seen the numbers in terms of store growth, physical store growth, but this is where they're putting their muscle and their money.
Yeah, they clearly are. This is a big investment into, kind of really big, exciting markets, markets where they don't have store presence. On the surface, it seems like an incredible strategy, right? To go in relatively asset light. These are big, expensive assets, but, versus, building a fleet of stores and everything that's required to support those. Yeah. Certainly a faster and, lighter asset way to get in.
Yeah, the guy writing the guy writing the check to Ocado probably would argue with the phrase.
Yeah, well, no, definitely. There's a lot of dollars here, and I know that just obviously with the e-commerce experience that I've had, you got to crank a lot of volume out of those models, and you have to get really good kind of customer density, in the routes that come out of those models, and so you have to have pretty high hopes and confidence that you're going to be able to achieve those things. So you would think, with making this move that they're making, that in their existing markets, they're modeling out now, and they kind of have line of sight to, all right, what is it going to take to what kind of volume do we need to get out of these markets? What kind of density do we need to generate? What kind of market share do we need to acquire to be able to bring these this capability into these markets and actually yield the return? They have to be willing, I'm sure there's an investment horizon on these things, right? You shouldn't expect anything, and really any kind of R&D, you got to be willing to invest and take some losses for a period of time, but you can't do that, forever. So hopefully they've got a line of sight on how these things become profitable. Ultimately, the shareholders are gonna need that.
I would work on I'm assuming that the market share math has to work out before the profitability math, right? Is the play on something like this that you've got to generate, a significant, not significant of market share, but enough market share that the profitability will follow in a period of time?
Yeah, market share, number of customers that are using the service is going to generate the volume, right, that the service serves. And the hub of the hub and spoke model, they're CFCs. They require a lot of volume to come out of those things to make to generate a return on the asset and a return on the operating cost of those buildings. And then of course the goods go from there out to the MFCs. And each of those MFCs, are going to have a requirement for volume and customer density and kind of all that stuff that comes off of it. But yes, originally that's, you get market share. Market share enables you to get and grow volume, and then it's that volume that enables the model to be profitable.
Yeah, it's interesting. There were a couple of emails after the story broke that people sent me on Morning Newsbeat, and one of them said, I think this is a great idea, right? They're able to do this. They don't have to open stores. Then if they want to acquire stores or build stores down the road, they can build different kinds of stores. Mm-hmm. They thought it was a brilliant model. But somebody wrote in, and this was, I think, reaction to a certain extent to something I wrote, which is that, building infrastructure is one thing, but building a differential advantage is another. And this person made the point that he had lived a lot of time in Kroger markets, but had never once, when not living in a Kroger market, yearned for something that he could only buy at Kroger. And I thought that was a really interesting observation, to about how what one of the things that they've got to figure out.
Yeah, right. What is that unique value you're going to provide your customers? And we've talked about this, right? We've always said e-commerce is kind of table stakes. You have to be in e-commerce. You have to serve, the customer and the occasion that calls for e-commerce. But ultimately, it's that emotional attachment that you need to generate. And lots of times, it's great products, it's unique products, it's sensory experiences, it's those kinds of things. And that gets a little bit harder, to offer those, that type of differentiation. Thinking about things like, I'm going to offer a really compelling assortment. I'm going to have a really good service level, with high certainty that I'm getting the products I'm ordering. There's not going to be a lot of substitutions or out of stock. It's going to be delivered when I ask it to be delivered, it's going to be delivered at a good price. But then you have to keep earning that. You have to, what are the potentially unique products you can offer within there? Are there other services you can start to offer around it? You're going to have to bring kind of a whole bundle of value, ultimately to be able to establish a meaningful, an enduring foothold in these markets.
Yeah. And, they do have certain advantages because they do have their 8451 dunnhumby technology. They've got more data and they have a history of using the data. So they've got that advantage. But yeah, I mean, I think that the question that they, to go back to a word that, we use a lot on Morning News Beat, we've talked a lot about, and that was used a lot, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. They need to figure out what's essential about them and what is differentiated. Because if they don't define those things, all the robotic warehouses in the world are not going to make them successful.
Absolutely. They have to provide a value that is over and above the options that the customers in those markets have today. Right. Give them a reason to switch and give them a reason to stay.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, and there was another story that's run in the past week, and that's about how Farmstead, which is a pure play e-grocery model, not just in a few markets, has basically signed a deal with Circle K. That's alimentation couche-tard. They've got their, they put an investment into Farmstead. And the idea is, although it's still relatively, I'm not sure if it's unformed or undisclosed, is to figure out a way to use convenience stores, of which they've got many in a lot of different locations, to use them as drop-off points, maybe develop, micro-fulfillment centers in conjunction with them, conceivably enlarge what the convenience store means to those communities. And I think that's a really interesting, combination.
It is very interesting to think about, the different forms that this could take on. You just look at the existing kind of merchandise set, of a Circle K. Right. You look at what could be added to that when you bring, a kind of a farm to table like, kind of grocery experience to that. You have the convenience of the locations, the services with gas, and and probably a real opportunity to even raise the culinary bar of the locations, beyond your typical kind of C-store assortment. And then they're in a lot of really good locations. They tend to be where people drive. They tend to be convenient to when they're on their way to and from work, or close proximity to a highway. So there's a lot of I think interesting. There's a lot of interesting potential for this combo.
And certainly an example of the notion of uncommon partnerships, which we talked a lot about at NGA, especially in the Retail Tomorrow sessions.
Yeah, it's about as it's maybe not quite as uncommon as you get, but yeah, I mean, you're taking this kind of farm to table-esque e-commerce experience and combining it with a great C-store, or a very good to great C-store. It's pretty uncommon, and it'll be pretty awesome to see where they take it.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I've talked to here on Morning Newsbeat about the NGA experience, which I just thought I had to, maybe it's because I hadn't done one. I mean, I did NGA last September, but last September felt like I was just kind of, it wasn't quite all forming yet. This one it felt different. It felt, and I just found the sessions, everybody, I mean, the panelists were great, the audiences were great. There just was a lot of energy about it, and topics that seemed to me, really on point in terms of what independents need to do going forward.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can tell when you're on stage, you can just see the reaction in folks' faces and their body language and the eye contact, and and then even the questions that would come out of the crowd, very pointed questions. Clearly it's a crowd that is, grappling with, the challenges of, kind of a post-pandemic world where we've had the surge in volume, and that's great. We worked, borderline heroically, maybe not even borderline heroically, to serve that volume safely during the pandemic. And we've seen this massive shift in our e-commerce volume. And we got to figure out now how to capitalize on this and take it forward. And I think the quality of the conversations, the notion of uncommon partnerships, being willing to work with folks and maybe a level of risk and or partnering or trust that you may not have been comfortable with in the past. It was really, I think it was really refreshing. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And when you think about that, the one session, the one Retail Smart session that you and I did, right, where you had Vic Gatto talking about the fact that when hospitals are most worried about how when patients go home after surgery, how they're going to eat.
Yep.
We talked about Replenium, your automatic replenishment business. We talked about Sifter, which is actually able to target products, foods that people either need to eat or want to eat because of medical conditions or health issues or whatever it happens to be. And then when you add into that, look at the Farmstead-Circle K thing, right? If those guys wanted to say, hey, listen, in the communities that we're serving, and there aren't that many yet, but in the communities we want to serve, we have all these locations. We need to be a part of that continuum. Suddenly they've come into the mix. They're really uncommon because nobody would think about, oh, wait a minute, I'm coming out of the hospital. I really need to shop at Circle K.
Right.
But now that actually could become an important cog in that piece of machinery.
Yeah, because you leave the hospital or the doctor with with a condition that requires a certain nutritional profile, and your shopping list can be generated based on that profile. You can put the products that that you want to get on a recurring basis. You can put those on auto replenishment, and it's available from this uncommon partnership of Circle K and Farmstead together, and pretty neat to be able to think of the types of capabilities that are out there today retailers can bring to market without big investment, right? In the past, if you wanted to offer any of these things, you'd have to think, all right, well, I got to build this thing. It's going to take me time to design it. Am I going to get it right? And then I'm going to put my resources on building it, and then I got to market it to customers, and I've got to work through the iterations of getting it to work in market. And now you can work with a partner that has invested their own R&D in this, has market tested it extensively, knows how to bring it to market, knows how to promote it, knows how to integrate it into the balance of your offering. And you can, most of this stuff you can kind of pay as you go. You don't have to have a big upfront cost. So, I think the ability today for retailers to be agile, to figure out and tweak in R&D their customer value proposition, and then to bring this ecosystem of uncommon partners together. It's I won't say it's easy, but it's as easy as it ever has been, in that all these companies have their stuff pretty well baked and figured out, and they come with a set of APIs and a set of standards that enable you to implement it really fast. And if it doesn't work, you can pivot on to something else, if your customers don't like it.
And it seems to me the thing that people in the food industry really need to realize, whether you're Kroger or Albertsons, right, which are giant companies, or you're a two-store independent, is that you better start working in this direction, because here's the deal. If you don't, Circle K and Farmstead might. Absolutely. They're going to, or Amazon, right? Because they've already made very clear their commitment to the healthcare sector. If you don't do those things, somebody else is going to come and steal it. I mean, absolutely, they're going to come steal it. Yeah. And just because you're working with an existing set of partners today doesn't mean you have to stick with those partners, right? Speed is going to be more important. Being able to tailor your offering and adapt it to, where your customers are today, where you want to help take them. If you have partners in your ecosystem, whether it's your e-commerce provider or, whatever, you better hold them to a standard where, they're able to move as fast as you want to move.
and don't get stuck with a partner that kind of, almost acts like a legacy, department in your company, right? Where they have, they can't move fast or not agile. Like, no, you need today, it's a completely different standard, because you are competing with the likes of Amazon that moves very fast, and the larger chains that have resources. The good news about competing with the larger chains that have resources is the bigger you are, the harder it generally is to move fast, except for in Amazon's case, because they're so wired to be innovative. But so I think when you're smaller, you really have a great opportunity now to grab the share hearts and minds of your customers.
Well, and to me, one of the things that I think retailers sometimes don't remember is that differential advantages and now uncommon partnerships, they all have expiration dates.
They do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you have an uncommon partnership and you build yourself a differential advantage. And as soon as you do that, you have to start figuring out the next one.
Well, the industry is, this is not a secret for those listening today. The industry is it's a copycat industry, right? You find a best practice and everybody then wants to do it. Well, and it makes sense because it does become the shopper expectation,
right?
So you have to meet that. So folks, will often kind of all elevate to meet that standard, right. And then it's like, who's going to be the next ones to develop that next, that next iteration of kind of raising the customer expectation bar, because the ones that continually raise it are the ones that are going to win.
Yeah. Well, listen, and we've been spending how many years now doing the innovation conversation. And the whole notion of that has been on being what's next, right? That's always been the conversation.
It still feels like our first year, Kevin.
And we haven't aged at all.
No, not at all.
Anyway, well, that's it for this edition of the innovation conversation. Tom, I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds great, Kevin. I look forward to it. Thank you. Bye.